All right, so get this. Today we're diving into this debate that's got everyone in Guyana talking, and it's all about electronic voting.
Interesting.
Yeah, so picture this. It's election day, everyone's at the polls, the energy is high, and all of a sudden, bam, power goes out.
Oh, wow. Talk about stressful.
Right.
Yeah.
Total chaos. Not just inconvenient, but like a recipe for disaster when it comes to trusting the results.
Yeah.
So we're going deep, using these documents from Guyana's Ministry of Legal Affairs to see if this fear of tech failing on election day, is it legit or just, overblown?
Well, I think what's interesting here is that we're not just talking about what ifs. I mean, Guyana's 2020 election, there were some, let's just say, issues.
Right, definitely.
And the discrepancies, they really shook people's faith in the system.
For sure. So let's look at these documents. It seems like two very different sides here. First, we've got Attorney General Anil Mandlal basically saying the current manual voting system is working just fine.
Yeah, the classic if it ain't broke, don't fix it argument. But his point is, introducing electronic voting, especially in a country where, blackouts happen, it just opens up a whole new can of worms. He even talks about, imagine a fingerprinting machine failing on election day.
Oh, yikes.
Someone's denied their right to vote because of a tech glitch.
I mean, yeah, you can totally see it happening. Long lines, people getting frustrated, and all because of a tech issue. He really hammers home the point that those failures, they have real consequences.
Absolutely. But then you have the other side, the Alliance for Change, the AFC. They're saying, wait a minute, the 2020 election showed us that things are broken.
Right.
We're bringing up cases of dead people's names still on voter lists, other irregularities, basically saying these flaws erode public trust and a more transparent system is needed, tech or no tech.
So it's not even necessarily tech is the answer for them. It's more like we need a system people actually believe in.
Yeah, exactly. And they're calling for a transparent dialogue to figure out what technologies, if any, would actually work for Guyana. It's like, you're not going to just buy any car, right?
True.
You do your research, safety, reliability, all that. AFC wants that same thoughtfulness applied to voting changes.
Makes sense. So it's more about a cautious approach, not just jumping on the tech train because it's shiny and new.
Yeah.
It also seems like they're pushing GCOM, the Guyana Elections Commission, to be more upfront and proactive, addressing these concerns, not just relying on the occasional press release.
It's like they're not just looking for statements. They want real engagement where they can voice their concerns and get actual answers. How would any new tech work? What are the safety nets? What if, the power does go out?
Okay, so we've got this tension building. On one side, the AG's warning about tech failing at the worst moment. And on the other side, the AFC pushing for changes, saying the current system is just too open to errors or even manipulation. It feels like a real turning point for Guyana, some big decisions to be made about how they want their democracy to function. But before we jump ahead, let's break down these concerns the AFC has about the 2020 election. What exactly did they find so troubling?
Well, they pointed to a few key things, and it's not just vague complaints. They've got evidence. One of the big ones was deceased people's names still on those voter lists.
Oh, wow.
And in some areas, enough to seriously question the whole process.
I mean, a few names slipping through, okay, maybe a mistake. But we're talking numbers that could swing an election? That's different. How did that even happen? And are they doing anything to prevent it from happening again?
And that's exactly what the AFC wants to know. They're not just pointing fingers. They're showing examples and saying, we need accountability. They also bring up the lack of transparency during vote counting. There were allegations of stuff happening at polling stations, mismatches between ballots and the votes recorded.
So potential for human error, intentional messing with things, or just plain incompetence. It's no wonder people start losing trust. This is more than just tweaking a few procedures, right? We're talking about the core of democracy. The right to vote, knowing your vote matters, trusting the results actually show what people want. It's a lot to unpack.
It really is. And this is just the beginning. You're absolutely right. When people start questioning if the elections are even legitimate, it really undermines the whole idea of democracy. And the AFC makes a really strong argument that even without adding new tech, the current system has some serious weak spots that need fixing. They're not just saying change it. They want a system that's transparent, accountable, and most of all, trustworthy.
I get it. If you can't trust the system, why even bother participating? It seems like the 2020 election really showed those cracks, and now the AFC is looking for ways to fix them.
It's like, think about building a house. You wouldn't just throw up walls and call it a day, right?
Yeah.
You'd make sure the foundation is strong, materials are good, everything's built properly. And that's what they're saying about Guyana's elections. It needs that same attention to detail, that commitment to building something strong and dependable.
And that's where this transparent dialogue comes in, right?
Yeah.
It's not just GEACOM calling the shots. It's about getting everyone involved. Political parties, civil society, and most importantly, the people of Guyana.
Yeah.
Everyone discussing the best way forward.
It's about giving people a sense of ownership over the process, making sure everyone feels heard and like their concerns matter. They're saying this open discussion where different opinions are welcomed, that's crucial for rebuilding trust, whether they stick with the current system or go for electronic voting.
So it's like, let's talk honestly about what's working, what's not, and how to improve. But let's go back to tech for a second. I know we talked about those concerns the AG had about things going wrong, but it seems like the AFC thinks tech could actually be part of the solution. So what benefits do they see in electronic voting?
Well, they see a few advantages. First, it could potentially reduce human error, which is always a concern in any manual process, especially one as complex as an election.
Yeah.
Think about it. No more miscounting ballots or writing down results wrong or mistakes with voter registration.
So you're removing that human factor, which could mean more accurate and trustworthy results.
Yeah, exactly. And that could really boost public confidence in the outcome. They also point to efficiency, streamlining the whole process from registration to counting the votes. Faster, easier for everyone.
That makes sense. Quicker results, less waiting, less room for those accusations flying around.
And there's another benefit they mention, accessibility. Electronic systems could make it easier for people with disabilities or those in remote areas to vote.
That's a really important point, making sure everyone, no matter their physical limitations or where they live, has an equal chance to vote.
Exactly. They're making a case that tech, if it's implemented carefully and with the right safeguards, could actually strengthen Guyana's democracy, making it more inclusive, more efficient, and more trustworthy.
It's interesting how they emphasize that implemented thoughtfully part. They're not saying just use any tech. They want a system that fits Guyana's specific needs and addresses those past problems without creating new ones.
Right, and that brings us back to that transparent dialogue. They're basically saying, don't just surprise us with a new system. Let's talk openly about the pros and cons, the risks and benefits, and most importantly, let's have the Guyanese people involved.
So it's not just the technology itself. It's the whole process, the transparency, the collaboration. Building a system that people can trust, paper ballots or electronic touchscreens, it doesn't matter. But what would that dialogue actually look like? What questions should we ask when considering electronic voting? What safeguards do we need?
Good question. I think the first step is to set clear standards for evaluating any potential voting system. What are the non-negotiables? What must it have in terms of security, accuracy, accessibility?
Like setting the ground rules.
Yeah.
Making sure everyone's on the same page about what they want. You don't want to end up with something that looks impressive but doesn't actually meet people's needs.
Exactly. And once you have those standards, you start asking the tough questions. How safe is this from hackers? What if the power goes out or there's a technical glitch? What kind of record is there to make sure the results are accurate?
And who's in charge of keeping the system running and making sure everything's above board? How do you guarantee nobody's messing with it? Those are big questions that need real answers.
Definitely. And that's where expertise comes in. Cybersecurity professionals, election observers, people who really understand tech, the vulnerabilities of these systems, the best ways to keep elections safe. It can't just be about buying the newest tech.
Right. It's about understanding it.
Yeah. How it works, how it fits Guyana's needs, what protections are in place so it's used ethically and responsibly.
And being realistic about what tech can and can't do. No system is perfect. There are always risks. The key is to minimize them. Planning carefully, testing thoroughly, and constantly monitoring.
You got it. It's not a one-time fix. It's an ongoing process of evaluating, improving, adapting.
But even with the best tech and the tightest security, there's still the human element. How do you make sure the people running the system, the ones counting the votes, are trustworthy and unbiased?
That's a huge point. Tech can help, but it can't replace human oversight and accountability.
So it's about multiple layers. Secure technology, strong safeguards, and maybe most importantly, a culture of transparency and accountability that runs through every part of the election.
You nailed it. It's not about choosing between tech and tradition. It's about finding the right mix of both. A balance that ensures things are efficient and honest, a balance that worked for the people of Guyana and makes their democracy stronger.
It seems like Guyana is at a crucial point, facing some tough decisions about how they want their elections to work in the future. But there's also this chance to build something better, something more resilient, something that truly reflects the will of the people. But before we get carried away, let's bring it back to reality. What are some of the practical problems Guyana might face if they go the electronic voting route?
Well, one immediate challenge is infrastructure. Like a lot of developing countries, Guyana has limitations when it comes to internet access, consistent power supply, and the technical expertise to set up and maintain a complex electronic voting system.
So it's not just about the tech itself, but having the right infrastructure to support it. Electronic voting in remote areas with unreliable internet or power, that could be a big problem.
For sure. And then there's the cost. Setting up a nationwide system is a huge financial investment, and for countries with limited resources, that could be tough to manage.
So we're talking about not just buying the equipment, but also maintaining it, training people, keeping it secure.
Exactly.
A big commitment.
And we can't forget about potential pushback from voters. People need to feel comfortable with the technology, trust that their votes are being counted right, and believe the system is safe from tampering.
So there might be a learning curve for people used to paper ballots in the old ways. You can't just assume everyone will welcome new technology.
Exactly. They might need big education campaigns to explain how it works, address concerns, build trust. And then there's the digital divide. Not everyone has computers or smartphones, so you don't want to create a system that leaves those who are less tech-savvy behind.
So it's about making the system accessible to everyone, no matter their tech skills or economic situation. Making sure the shift to electronic voting doesn't exclude anyone.
Right. And that takes planning and really understanding the needs and challenges of the Guyanese people.
Clearly, moving to electronic voting is a big decision, not to be rushed. There are real challenges, and it's important to weigh those against the benefits.
Absolutely. And it's crucial to remember, tech isn't a magic solution. It can improve things, but it won't solve every problem. The success of any election system comes down to the integrity of the people running it and their dedication to democratic principles.
We've talked about the potential benefits and the real-world challenges of electronic voting, but we also touched on something bigger, something that goes beyond the mechanics of how votes are cast and counted: trust. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter how fancy the tech is or how strong the security is if people don't trust the system.
You're right, you can have the best tech in the world, but if people don't trust it, it's pointless.
And that's where that transparent dialogue we talked about is so important. It's not just about explaining how the tech works. It's about creating a sense of ownership and shared responsibility for keeping the elections honest.
Exactly. It's about creating a space where people can voice their concerns, get their questions answered, and have their doubts addressed openly and honestly.
So it's not just GCOM telling people what to think. It's about truly listening to their concerns, engaging with them, and showing a real commitment to transparency and accountability.
Exactly. And it's about involving citizens in the decision-making process, making sure their voices are heard and their needs are considered.
It's about building a system that people trust, not because they're told to, but because they get it. They understand how it works, they see it's fair, and they believe it reflects what the people want. It's a tough task, but the AFC seems to believe it's possible, and they're urging GIACOM to take it on. But this whole conversation about Guyana's elections got me thinking bigger. How are other countries handling these same issues? Are there any lessons Guyana can learn from?
Great question. And it's something democracies around the world are dealing with right now.
Yeah, it's like we're all in this together, figuring out how to make democracy work in this digital age. So what are some things other countries are trying to ensure fair and secure elections?
Well, one approach that's gaining some traction is this idea of a hybrid system.
Okay.
Basically combining parts of both electronic and manual voting. So you might have electronic voting machines at the polling stations, but then also have paper ballots as a backup.
Oh, I see. So like a double check, just in case.
Exactly. You get the speed and efficiency of the electronic system, but you still have that paper trail that can be audited if there's a question or a problem.
Makes sense. That paper trail could be really important for building trust. People knowing their votes are being recorded correctly and that there's a way to double check things. What else?
Another interesting trend is the use of open source software for those electronic systems.
Open source. So that means anyone can look at the code, right?
Yeah, that's the idea. More transparency, more scrutiny. Independent experts can go through the code, look for any vulnerabilities, any potential security risks, even suggest improvements.
So it's about being open, saying, we've got nothing to hide. Here's how it works. Pretty bold, but I can see how it could help build confidence in the system. Are there other approaches?
Some countries are even trying out blockchain technology.
Wait, blockchain, like the stuff behind cryptocurrencies. How would that even work for voting?
It's still pretty new, but it has potential. Basically, blockchain is like a super secure digital record-keeping system. It's decentralized, which means it's not all stored in one place that could be hacked. And once a vote is recorded on the blockchain, it's almost impossible to change or delete it.
So, like an unbreakable chain of records, each one connected to the next, making it really hard to mess with.
Exactly. And because it's decentralized, no single point of failure.
Wow. Sounds pretty impressive.
Yeah,
But even with all this amazing technology, I guess it still comes down to the people involved, right?
you got it. Strong institutions, a solid legal framework, and a culture that values democracy. Those things have to be in place for any system to really work.
It's not just about the tech itself. It's about the foundation, the principles, the commitment to fairness. It seems like Guyana is facing challenges that a lot of democracies are trying to figure out as we move into this new era of tech and elections.
Absolutely. And the key takeaway is there's no one-size-fits-all answer. Each country has to find what works best for them, their specific situation, their needs, their culture.
So learning from each other, sharing ideas, but also knowing that what works in one place might not work in another. It's about finding that balance between new ideas and old traditions, between security and making sure everyone can participate, between technology and trust. We covered a lot today, from what's happening on the ground in Guyana to how countries around the world are trying to make elections work in the digital age.
It's been a really great discussion looking at this complex and important issue. And I think for anyone listening, the takeaway is this isn't just a debate for politicians and experts. It's a conversation we should all be part of. The strength of our democracies depends on all of us being informed, involved, and committed to those democratic values.
That's a great point to end on. Thanks so much for walking us through this whole landscape of technology, elections, and the ongoing work to make democracy even stronger. And to everyone listening, we'll leave you with this thought. As technology keeps changing the world around us, what role do you think it should have in protecting our elections and making sure every single vote truly counts? Until next time, stay curious and stay engaged.